In this video, I want to talk about how English relates to other grammars in the world. English occupies a complicated position among the world's languages because it's such a dominant language. It has this complex history with colonialism, with exploitation, and so in some ways I think we feel hesitant to say that English is somehow special because it's got this complex history. However, there are many ways in which English is a very special language. We talked a little bit about how English has gone through several rounds of creolization, that Anglo-Saxons and Jutes coming to the British Isles eventually intermingled with Celtic-speaking Britons, and the language that resulted, which we call Anglo-Saxon, is a slightly creolized Germanic language, and then that had interaction with Old Norse brought by Vikings, which creolized as well to Old English, and then Norman invaders came from France, conquered England in 1066, and the Norman French creolized with the Old English to form what we call Middle English, the language of Chaucer. And then there have been several other creolization processes. English has been spoken all over the world. In general, we see the creole processes of the language relying less on morphology, on endings and inflection, and more on syntax. But let's dig into some of the things that actually make English special when we compare it to how many of the other languages in the world work. English grammar is an interesting grammar, and in some ways a deceptively challenging grammar for something that seems so simple on the surface. Let's first look at English phonology. The sound system of English, or the Englishes, has lots of fricatives. Sh, j, s, z, f, v, f, v. These sounds that can be held out. There are many languages in the world that use nowhere near as many fricatives as English does, which can pose a challenge to its learners. These rare interdental sounds, the and th, are very rare among the world's languages, so those pose a particular challenge. English has the world's rarest R. Of course, this depends on which dialect of English, but if you're a North American English speaker, the R, the retroflex R, the alveolar retroflex R at the beginning of a syllable and the velar retroflex R at the end of a syllable are pretty rare. Most R's are taps, or trills, among the world's languages. It's got a crowded vowel space. We have 11 cardinal vowels in North American English. E, a, o, u, and these vowels are very close to each other. Most languages may have 3 or 5 or 6 vowels, where English has 11. And these tense lax pairing, E versus I, A versus E, U versus U, O versus A, that's a very unusual system. Unstressed vowels in English all go to schwa, which is very interesting that these vowels have two different realizations in stressed and unstressed syllables. You don't normally find that. And the contrast between stressed and unstressed is very large. It's a contrast in volume, in pitch, and duration, as well as vowel position. So we use this extreme contrast between stressed and unstressed in a way that most languages in the world don't. The English lexicon is also particularly challenging. There are often multiple words for every concept. One word from German, one word from French, one word from Latin. I can think of kingly being Germanic, royal being French, and regal from Latin. There's many of these sorts of pairs all across the language where we use one word from each and we slightly tease apart the meaning of these things, like foretell in German and predict in Latin. One word can have many parts of speech. I can have a fly, or I can have the verb to fly. I can have the adjective fly. So, like Mandarin, English words, you can't always tell by their shape what their part of speech is. The same form can take many parts of speech. We have this phrasal verb system, which we sort of inherited from the Vikings, to go out with someone, to look up to someone, to hang out, to ham up, where we have a verb with something that looks like a preposition that follows it. These can be separable. I can't hang out my friend with. I have to hang out with my friend. But I can look up the number, or I can look the number up. So what are the relative positions of these different things, or to wring out my clothes, wring my clothes out. And then there are transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs. Some take an object, some don't take an object. That's a complicated system with a huge set of prepositions compared to many other languages in the world. And we have pretty picky derivational morphemes. Because we have derivational morphemes from German, from French, from Latin, from Greek, there's many different derivational morphemes that would turn a verb into a noun, or an adjective into a noun, or a noun into a verb. And knowing which of the many possible endings you're supposed to use is a very complicated set of knowledge for English learners to acquire. The grammar itself is interesting. So the same inflections in English have more than one job. This is a result of our creolization. We creolized a lot, but not fully. So we still have some inflections, but those inflections are put to multiple uses. The ending ing can be used to form a participial adjective, the watching crowd, or a progressive aspect verb, the crowd was watching, or the crowd is watching. The ending s can be used to be a genitive, the apostrophe S in John's books there. A third person singular present, Mary likes, versus Mary and Jim like. And then the plural nouns, books versus book. So the same ending has three different jobs. The ER ending can be the agent, the person who does something, like the truck driver. The instrument, the tool that you use, a fly swatter or a screwdriver. It can also be a comparative adjective, like long, longer. Be, the auxiliary be, can use passive voice, this can't be done by someone, or progressive aspect, this can't be happening. Have, the auxiliary have, can be used to form perfect aspect. I have read the book. Can also, we've got a causative have. I have them read the book. So we're recycling, reusing the same sort of set of forms for many different functions, which poses a really big challenge, and it's fairly unique among the world's languages. English grammar, as a result of the creolization processes, is heavily a perspective-taking grammar. Not as much as you might fully expect in a Creole language, but more than in many other European languages that are relatives and cousins of English. Perspective taking is built into the grammar. So English forces you to take a perspective on the countability of nouns. I want some water, or I want some waters. Is your perspective on water as a substance or as a concrete collection of that within a container? We use much energy. We use many energies. That would be different types of energy. Do I see energy as a general thing, or do I see energy as a set of specific kinds and sources? That's going to be built into the grammar. The perfect aspect for verbs is pretty much just a perspective taking. The bridge washed out. The bridge has washed out. The only difference between those two sentences is slightly what are the implications for what we're talking about now? How do we see this event from the perspective of our current conversation? That's a really abstract thing to ask learners to acquire. They lost the war, they had lost the war. Again, this difference between past and past perfect is also just a matter of perspective. And then definiteness is maybe the most challenging aspect of English grammar, especially for languages that don't necessarily mark definiteness this way. It's important to write the answer. It's important to write an answer. How familiar do I think that the reader or speaker is with the set that I'm mentioning, with the noun? Is it already been activated in their brain or not? That's a really challenging ask for learners to acquire this article system, this definite system in English, which is all a matter of perspective. Most of the time, all answers are right, or that you could make all answers right. It just depends on the perspective you have. English, because we don't have that many endings, we don't have that many inflections, prefixes, suffixes that do grammatical work the way that they would in Spanish, for example. We have to do a lot of movements in English to transform our grammar, to show the relationships between elements. So you like what? What do you like? The what moves from the object position up into that focus position at the top of the sentence. You can come moves to can you come. I like Coke moves to Coke I like. It's Coke that I like. What I like is Coke. Like Coke is what I do. Liking Coke is what I do best. That which I like is Coke. Coke is liked by me. We have all of these different grammatical structures which promote Coke in different ways out of the sentence, I like Coke, each providing a different set of nuance, each involving a complicated combination of movement and addition of additional grammatical elements. And these formulas are tricky to acquire, but are important for showing the relative perspective we have, what role this entity of Coke or liking Coke plays in the larger surrounding discourse. And our system of auxiliaries is more developed than in almost any language. We have this do support system, which probably came from the Celtic neighbors way back in the 5 and 600s as the Anglo-Saxons first landed on England. But I come, you can emphasize it by saying I do come. In fact, we have to have this do when we try to negate the verb come. English verbs can't be negated. I don't come. I have to have this do when I make a yes or no question. Do I come? Or a negative yes or no question. Don't I come? To answer that question, yes, I do, where do can stand for come. Do I come? Yes, I do. I can go. I could go. I could be going. I could have gone. I could have been going. So you see this auxiliary stacking where you can have multiple auxiliaries, and each of these is going to change the form of the verb which follows it or select that. Um, Here we have I am watched. This is a passive. I am being watched. I've got a passive and a progressive. I have been being watched. I've got a perfect, a passive, and a progressive. And I do this all not by changing the form of the verb, but by adding different auxiliaries, each of which trigger a change in the following auxiliaries ending. Here, have selects for the en, this B selects for the ing, this B selects for the ed, so I get this stacking of auxiliaries, each of which trigger a change in the following word. These are all things that make the English grammar really unique among the world's languages, and as frustrating as it can be sometimes, I hope that you have an appreciation actually for just how curious it can be, and I think this is something that's important as well to cultivate in our learners.